thanks so much for coming after lunch. We're deeply honored, seriously. So, so yeah. Um, quick question. Before we start, first of all, Ravi, thanks so much for joining me. It's a pain to work with me. I don't know, you know,
No, no,
how,
not at all,
how
not
Ravi
at all.
managed,
No, no, it's a
So,
pleasure. It's a pleasure.
I had a few questions. I honestly hate the term Bharat because I don't know why we're trying to create, certain differences amongst us and our brothers sisters living probably in tier two, tier three. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly get a sense that what is it you guys are looking from this session. Maybe we can try and mold and take a few questions. Typically questions are taken afterwards. We would love to maybe take a couple before and try and see if we are aware and if we understand the subject. We would love to chat about that. If anyone has any questions. Beautiful. We'll definitely cover that. Yeah. Sure. I'm just texting him so that he covers all this. I just WhatsApped him, like you have to cover this, Ravi. So sounds good. Anyone else? Asking the guy asking it works for the largest telco in India, Sunil Bharti Mittal, is asking this question. We'll try to cover that up. Thank you so much. Thanks again. And great. Ravi, should I start grilling you or you want to go
Yeah,
first?
yeah. You want to probably start off. So I think how do we change the slides? Is it a clicker?
I don't know. Bus, we have a few slides.
Okay, great. Let me see if this works. Okay, great. So
Should we go back? So I tried to, we get this question, what is Bharat, and who are Bharat users? So I just tried to put a photograph, which kind of shows that everyone is Bharat. you know. So everyone living in India is truly Bharat, but definitely when uh, setting the context for this panel is that if Ravi and I try to define, we're trying to talk that what are the new internet users, right? What are their aspirations? What kind of businesses are they looking to, what softwares are they looking to, and what kind of products they probably want to use. Those are three questions I think we'll try to cover. Over to you.
yeah, yeah, Rahul. So I think so. Based on your observations, let me just start off with you. Now, what do you see Bharat users using digital technologies, and what are some of the apps that they are using right now, and how do they go about using that?
Yeah. Disclaimer. You know, the these are based on. So we Ravi and I put some slides. These are all based on user research, which could be very different. Because India is such a big country, right? So we probably talking to about 50 people doesn't give you an impression of 1.3 billion people, right? So these are the key learnings which we kind of brought up during our conversations with different startups, with different users. Um, I think the Bharat users, I'm really thankful to Geo and Airtel and other telcos which have kind of which have made internet so cheaper that it's finally reaching the masses. So it's really reaching tier three, tier four. It's to some level in tier five as well, and even more thankful to YouTube and WhatsApp. Those are two apps that I see each and every single phone probably in the country have. And while we go and design products, we try to think that no, people in tier 3 won't be able to use this, people won't understand that. Probably courtesy of WhatsApp and YouTube, they probably learned that so fast that we were amazed. uh, how many of you put WhatsApp stories? Can you raise your hand? Wow, I see only about four hands. You go to a tier 3, tier 2 town, people are crazy. They love putting WhatsApp stories. You know, it's a very surprising factor. While we think that they don't know, but those are the things for them, and where they've really learned using technology predominantly on 3 to 4 apps, and they know how to use it very, very well. It's actually their Facebook, their way to show that, hey, what is happening in our lives.
Absolutely. I think to add to this, we have also run. So I used to be a CTO of Tringo before moving on to a bigger role in Mahindra Farm Division. And as part of that, we figured out that there are many farmers who are using Facebook actively. We actually kind of did some good Facebook marketing campaigns as well to reach them. So it was pretty surprising for us. Okay, so do you want to also talk about Rahul on the adoption? What exactly do they use in the apps?
Sure. So predominantly, I think the recent new internet users are using more and more content. So also to answer your question, right, what are and the beauty is that on one side they're very excited to explore new apps. Second is they are seeing a lot of new content which wasn't accessible, and the whole content in itself rises their aspirations to new level, right? So and I was amazed. So just to give you some sense, Times Internet also is MX Player, and on a daily basis we reach close to about plus minus 150 million daily active users, and these are predominantly in tier 2, tier 3 towns. We do not this OTT player has a completely different strategy. We're not competitors to Netflix and Hotstar. So we're we're looking at building more and more vernacular content for India, what the majority of India wants. And what we figured out was that we had certain biases. We thought like a English series might not work, but we were just amazed when we looked at the data, that what are people searching for, what do they really want to see. So I think the tier 2, tier 3 audience is very aspirational, and more content like that is even helping them become the aspiration is going only up because of all that. And there are few apps. We figured out that these are the major apps currently being used in tier 2, tier 3, and I think TikTok would be number one, probably. Again, if you look at these, and I would add on probably another news app to it. I think those are the top 9 10 apps, MX Player, Pratilipi, Share Chat, Share It, because people still transfer a lot of videos to each other. Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp. So probably predominantly these are the apps continuously being used in tier 2, tier 3. Ravi, I got a question for you. How does it work? Like people, you know uh, most people are not literate, right? They can't go to um, you know a Google or create a Gmail account. How do they get onto these apps?
Yeah, great question. That's what we're going to talk about next. But before I kind of get into that, just one more thing I wanted to add to in terms of apps that at least even I have seen is that actually I was pretty surprised during one of my user research visits to the customer sites that I found phone pay on the farmers. In fact, this guy lives in a remote village actually in Maharashtra somewhere, right near Satara district. And I just asked him to kind of go get his smartphone. He was not carrying like how we always kind of stick to it. He had to go get inside, go get to his home, get it, asked him to show me the apps that he has. I was surprised to see phone pay. This is like 1 or 2 years back, right? So and now I'm sure Google Pay also has kind of really taken off pretty well, Paytm too. So I think in terms of what Rahul was saying earlier, Bharat is very aspirational. If you look at users in tier 2, 3, 4 villages, right, they're very aspirational. They're very open to trying out new things, but also we have to make it work for them. They also come with a lot of certain mindsets that we have to recognize, then it will work, right? So one of the mindsets here is about logins and how do we kind of enable seamless logins. And login to a mobile or any website, if you ask for a typical login as in enter a username and a password, is very cumbersome for them. They just don't get it. It's in fact, it's quite intimidating for them. So even in our experiences, how we were designing, we always just limited it to OTP, right? Mobile number and OTP. Right, and OTP, most, as you know, as you found out, most apps they auto read OTPs, but sometimes you also have to kind of make provision that if you don't have any network coverage, it's not easily available, readily available, then you have to kind of have some backup plan, right? But logins with just mobile number OTPs are just good enough. In fact, I was talking to Genie's CEO here. I don't know if he's here. He was sharing a very interesting insight about how users were entering their email address and expected the password, their Gmail email address, and expected the Gmail's password to work for other sites, right? So that's the kind of the perception they have, right? And they get stopped at that. If you cannot log in, you cannot proceed, right? So we have to really make sure that you have a quick way for them to kind of get in, and OTPs work pretty well.
Leave that, Ravi. My sister still thinks it's the same password which works everywhere. So
Okay.
so interesting. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think this is some of the yeah. I think this, yeah. One more point I would like to make here is yeah, this is also very interesting that we found out, Rahul, that predominantly the how the Bharat users, Bharat segment, uh, goes about accessing and using their phones and other apps is that they first start off with going to the to the store and getting their smartphone activated. For that, they definitely need an email address because Google mandates that you have to have an email address, and the shopkeeper creates one for them, and that's the end of that usually. But one interesting demographic observation here is that, which I also found very true in case of Tringo, is that we saw a very clear distinction between when if the farmers are above a certain age, typically around more than 50 years old, then they are very less likely to use smartphone actively, even forget about even having a smartphone with themselves. But if they're below 50, yeah, 40 up until 40 also, they are pretty open to it. But we always found at least one smartphone per household, right? Somebody was having a smartphone in their household. Uh, in case of, I can give examples of farmers because that is a direct observation. But in other cases also, I think you will usually find a smartphone, one smartphone per household. Either the wife or the daughter or son-in-laws, daughter-in-law, somebody is using the smartphone. So it's just a very interesting adoption pattern.
yeah, and it's very common for you know. How many of you probably would have ever seen your helper at home or office boy essentially paying 10 or 20 rupees to get a movie put up on their phone from nearby shops? I don't know if anybody has seen that. That's a very common practice, across India. Maybe if you go back and check, you might find that, or probably because of Share It and MX, this trend could be on a very high decline. But since OTTs didn't get popular and they would not find a lot of content on YouTube, specifically like entire movies, I've seen this. They would go to a small shop and pay 10 or 20 rupees and get a movie, got on their phone. And the same practice is used to get a lot of apps also on their phones, essentially.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Rahul, so the next question goes to you. So, how do you solve the big trust problem? And what are some of the patterns you have seen?
Sure. So, again, building on the same point, a lot of these users, first of all, trust their local shops because it exists, right? It's not air. So, in fact, I will be asking you some questions, around commerce and payments, but this is something we've seen because you have somebody, you can go back and grab that. Why is this not working? Essentially, second thing is what I've seen to a very strong extent is the other way is, again, listening to somebody or something versus seeing something, so during our conversation once, I was talking to a teacher, and a government teacher in a really far remote area. We said I was giving an example of that of dinosaurs, to my class, and he said the children started laughing, that such big structures used to exist because they've never seen them, they've never heard of them. He said until I took my phone out and showed them on YouTube that, what a dinosaur is, and they really existed, and that video built actual trust amongst kids that yes, dinosaurs existed. They might not be today, but there was a concept, or there was something like dinosaurs, for example. So yeah, video builds a lot of trust. We've seen this in our company called Grade Up, where initially a lot of students would come for free, test preparation, but essentially end up buying courses. And again, to be very honest, there's a in tier 3 there's a very small adoption of people paying, but tier 2, for example, stands out. Again, one of you asked that what is the adoption, and I'll probably bring in an example of SaaS, since you work in SaaS. um, but that's what we've seen, like more and more video kind of builds trust. If you move to the next slide, maybe I can show a couple of examples where we've seen, especially tier 2 users paying, but even to some extent tier 3. So that's an example of from grade where a teacher is giving live class, where they've seen that yes, there is a teacher who's teaching, who's even taking live questions, who's clearing our doubts. And then if you want to pay for the entire course, so that builds the confidence. And on the other side is one of my very interesting startup called Bulbul, which does live videos around products. So maybe an influencer would be selling a glass, right? That hey, Diwali is coming, guests are going to come to your house, get some nice Borosil crockery, right? And order right now. And she also would be taking live questions. For example, somebody might ask, are these made of plastic or glass or whatever? So live, you know, video essentially is another factor. So I think the three factors which I have noticed is physical presence, video, and word of mouth. So people download apps essentially a lot on the basis of what their friends are using, what they tell each other about, that hey, I bought this from Bulbul, or I saw this on GridUp, or I watched this really funny series on MX, and they'll suddenly download. They're very the one big factor is this audience is very, very, very hungry. Please make a note of this. I think this is the strongest point, because majority of the new age startups or even old age companies have ignored them, have not made products for this segment, and they're hungry, and they want more.
Awesome, awesome,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Also, another thing about villages is that, especially in villages, I mean, tier 2, tier 3 has their own dynamics too. But what I found in villages is that everybody knows everybody. So if there's a good thing or a bad thing, it spreads like wildfire, right? Anyway, yeah.
So okay, on that, maybe I can ask you a question. If everybody knows everybody and it spreads like fire, so if I order a really cool T-shirt from Flipkart in a village, does it spread like fire? Is that the talk of the village? And what is commerce like in villages, Ravi?
Yeah, great question. Commerce, I think the first thing here with commerce is people who are ordering, who want to order online, what address will they give? Right, tier 2, tier 3 are a little bit better, but I was actually surprised to find that villages don't have addresses. They don't even have pin codes. They use districts pin codes for them. So the postman knows where you live, right? So if you're going to settle in a village, make sure you go visit the postman or catch hold of the postman when he comes by. your neighbor's house. So with no addresses, it's just a name and this village name, and that's where your delivery should show up. So now, as Rahul was saying earlier, trust is a huge factor in these transactions, and we've also seen that ourselves. And there's this very old concept in India called this is banking correspondents who in villages go and do that. Mitra, bank mitra, they used to call it bank mitra, right? Something, yeah. So I think that role has kind of taken off, and now it is kind of, you can call them a village level entrepreneur, right? So companies like Paytm have used them very nicely, right? So these village level entrepreneurs are brokers, and they broker for multiple companies. They are your last mile delivery agents to the farmers, to the users, right? And and as I was saying earlier, everybody has to know everybody. When like, these guys are from the local villages, so the users know these guys. That's how they you have to build trust. That's how you can build trust. You go to set up a shop, Flipkart.com or Amazon.com or whatever. They'll ask you, where is your store? Right. The same thing happened to Tringo also. So you go set up a shop. Okay, where is your Tringo? No, you can order from the app. No, still, where is your store? Where's your hub? Right. Okay, you give them an address. It's there in Jaipura village in Mysore, near Mysore. Okay, got it. All right. If something goes wrong, I'll know. I can come and catch your neck. Right. And which they don't hesitate to do that. That's a different story. Uh, I think so. A couple of reasons. One is there's a really big opportunity and a problem that villages don't have addresses, and trust is only through for them seeing is believing, because they also have gone through multiple I would say certain schemes or so many campaigns that have not worked well for them. They're very wary of the next campaign that is coming and say, hey, here's the next big thing, right? So as for them, seeing is believing. And if they know somebody who is selling whatever, okay, they are a little bit more open to having that conversation. So that's how it kind of usually pans out.
Sure, I remember you putting something to maybe just yeah, I you know that's Stork Inc, which has partnered and opened thousands of stores across India. Which is solving, that's a local, so essentially that acts as your delivery pickup spot. So your parcels, if you're living in a village, you can find Stork Inc shops where you can go and collect your parcel. But the beauty is they also enact as the spot to order. So when you go there, you can, there's a gentleman or there's a lady standing, behind the desk with a pad, right? Who could show you that, hey, these are the catalogs, and if you want to order, right? And the beauty is it builds trust, because they'll say, and you can pay when it gets delivered. So you don't have to pay right now, but when it arrives in 4 to 5 days is when you can pay, and on my backside is a refrigerator getting delivered. So we spoke to some fantastic companies like Ruben, Boonbox, and Stork Inc, which essentially tells us, about how people everywhere, and that's why I say that it's unfortunate that there's like, we think people in rural areas don't want stuff, but it's right here. Everybody wants. There could be a you know there could be, in a lot of cases, there could be a paying capacity difference for sure, but they want products. It's just that there's no access, and that's why companies like Stork Inc and in3 Axis, Boonbox are growing really fast.
Absolutely, that's a great point. I mean, there's a lot of demand for them. In these markets, we just have to figure out these challenges for adoption. Okay. Um, all right. So, Rahul, any interesting insights about how campaigns have worked out in rural areas?
So I'm gonna pick your previous point, like you mentioned, like in villages, unfortunately, like the quacks, the doctors, the bunch of people who've started, different schemes, and to double their money, and end up disappearing. So a lot of people are definitely scared, of getting into something absolutely new, right? And this is really funny. So I learned this from Shardul of Agrostar, right? He told me, he said, like, when we tried deep discounting in villages, and we were trying to maybe sell a shovel or pickaxe at a 30-40% off, the farmer said that's impossible. He's giving it way too cheap. This is either going to be a horrible product or it's never going to arrive. So I was just amazed that how deep discounting in rural areas don't work, because it's an alien concept, right? Like, it's absolutely alien to them. That, how's that possible? It's completely impossible, right? So this was a great insight that I learned that if you're selling way too cheap, for them, no, it's absolutely equivalent to a fraud, you know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I think they may be. My observation is that they may be illiterate, but they're not uneducated. They view things in black and white, more or less. But it's the difference between illiteracy and education. They have got their own wisdom, their own view of viewing the world, right? And it's really refreshing to interact with those users.
Great. And Ravi, help me understand, like, how are these users searching? I mean, you yourself said, right, they don't type. Like, what is the way out?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful reading question, Rahul. So definitely anything that is natural is more easily adaptable by the users. And what we have found is that anything that where they have to speak and there's some natural language processing in the back end and kind of trying to interpret, that works out much better, both in terms of talking to the service, interacting with the experience, and also from a campaign perspective as well. If you want to reach out with a particular message, having short video clips of, let's say, 30 seconds in the local language, the video, right, works out much better. Because if they start to kind of start typing and entering their inputs, one is, of course, you have to deal with the language issue. Just to give an example, in farming there's an implement, right, which is actually fitted to a tractor called duckfoot cultivator. It's all about soil pulverization. So duckfoot cultivator provides a certain type of soil pulverization. So it is called by a different name in North Karnataka. It's called Madike in North Karnataka. In South Karnataka, it's called Balram Nigalu, right? So I don't know how many of you are from farming background, right? So that's so you're going to it's great that you have to kind of look at localization not just at the language level, but also at at a much one level, couple of level deeper into into that. So usually in these cases, voice works out much better, and in fact, you'll see most of these companies also have some sort of call center agent support for them to kind of also talk to humans if they need to.
Great, great.
So, Rahul, yeah, this is a great question for you, Rahul. The multi-million dollar question, I would say. Do you what's your observation about willingness to pay and affordability?
I think let me pull your first comment when you mentioned that the farmer had phone pay on his phone, you know. So, and I'll bring that and then connect the dots to paying, you know. So we all need to understand that uh, tier three problems are extremely different, right? And we I mean, even after doing all this research, and we still have way too many biases and, you know, unlearnings to do, you know, before understanding real needs. The only reason probably the farmer had a phone pay app might be, in fact, forgive me for using, you know, the reason would be, is it might be because the bank might be 30 kilometers away, out of which 10 kilometers he would have to walk till the road and then take a bus, and, you know, to for receiving a payment, or, you know, making a payment. So I think, you know, we need to very deeply understand the reasons of, you know, and the aspirations and issues, you know, and then kind of, you know, think of building solutions. And yeah, I mean, I think whether it was phone pay or ordering things, you know, whether it's e-commerce, um, there is a paying capacity. Uh, they definitely don't want to pay in one go. That's a very big you know, thing. They would love to pay in EMIs, you know, because, I mean, we need to understand how they make money and how they can pay, you know. So most users would never want to pay upfront or in one go, and they can't. That's the reality. So however, there are villages where electricity is a big issue, so either they want to get some solar panels, they want to get some inverters, or you know they just want fans or washing machines or refrigerators and everything, honestly, what we use. uh, so that's exactly how it is. The whole point is, in fact, larger corporations missing out on the opportunity, thinking that people don't want, but the reality is they want. You have to figure out what they really need. you know if you can cater to those needs, there's a multi, not billion but $1 trillion trade right there.
Great, fantastic, fantastic. I believe that.
Yeah.
Totally believe that. Yeah.
And let me ask you a question. When you said, whether a shopkeeper creates an email address for them, or when an OTP is fetched, right? So they're giving certain permissions, or the shopkeeper might have access to their, accounts, right? Or they're talking to the phone, so uh, they've already given the recording permission to, the likes of, we all know. So what is happening on the privacy front?
That is a very good question and a matter of deep concern for all of us. I can say that most of the Bharat users uh, are oblivious to data and privacy issues. I think they love each other, where they live too much, that they trust each other, and this data-based applications are hitting them, and they're not open to this new world, or probably don't have enough awareness about what malicious attacks could do to them. And but I think the scene is changing. While there is not a comprehensive understanding of data and privacy, but because of the sustained campaigns from the government and from the banks, they're very scary of sharing their OTPs. Right, so the one-time passwords, they're very scared of sharing that. And if you want to get their OTPs for consent that is delivered to their phone that you want to use, it's going to be very tricky, as we found out. You will not get good adoption through that. But yeah, that's a matter of concern, and it's just I think we have to kind of figure out ways to how we can educate them and then help them understand the nuances and the implications. But I've seen most apps have a data privacy in their apps terms and conditions, but they're all in English, and they're all like huge big documents in small font. Forget about Bharat. Even mainstream urban users also don't read that, right? But at least we're aware, but they're not even aware of that, and that's a matter of concern.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, what do you think, Rahul? What is the and especially asking you because you also are an investor as well. How does the future look like?
I think the future looks bright, because some people in this room are gonna probably build for Bharat, and some bunch of unicorns are definitely gonna come out of this room, I guess. So yeah, I would just say, with our last slide, that there's tons to solve, but don't build thinking what they need. Go and talk to them, spend time, stay there, uh, really get to know, and then build something. Because trust me, otherwise you'd be building for somebody else. So just be cautious, and just trying to cover your points. Um, uh, I'm definitely not talking about this image. If you're talking about SaaS here, there's only one word which would be understood, which is SaaS in North India, at least. Um, but if I talk about tier two, yes. If it's a busy shop, and if you bring in a SaaS product, uh, of course, I'm talking about India pricing. Yes, there is adoption. We recently invested in a company called Class Plus, which is a SaaS for tuition centers, and I'm amazed and very happy to say that a majority of revenue actually comes from tier two tuition centers, which pay the company to manage, tuition fees, homeworks, attendance, and all that, because essentially it saves time of that tutor. And like I'm saying, if you dig down the real issues, there's a very big market. People are more than happy to pay. Uh, Definitely not $100 a month, but maybe $200 for an year. You know, so we just need to be very cautious. Uh, that's what I would say. Yeah.
Great, awesome.
Questions for Ravi?
And my friend Rahul. The
Folks,
same.
we're open to questions. I think, Shrija, do we have about 4 minutes? Yeah, yeah. Please go for it, sir. So very simple. Typically, how when an American is walking on the roads and all Indian guys say like, "Hey, can we help?" is very similar. If you go to a village, people are extremely warm, welcoming. Just go spend time. You would. I mean, I'm not kidding you. They don't know you, but they'll offer you food at home. So the best way to collect insights is probably sit at a chai thela, spend your entire day, play a set of cards, and just talk. They're open libraries. We just spoke about, privacy. They are not aware of that concept, right? Or, and that's why, or the same thing we just talked about, that whether it's something good or bad, it spreads like fire because people don't understand the meaning of privacy. If I'm sorry to take a funny example, but if somebody in a tier one, had a breakup, he might not share it with his family or friends, but it's all public, if it's somewhere else. So it's easier to gather insights, but it's also very difficult because you would have your biases. If they're saying right, you might still hear left. That's a very common thing, prevalent amongst all of us. So yeah. Any more questions, Chief?
One question was, if you ClassPasses was a good example which you gave, where you can actually monetize and it's a proper software play. But for the majority of other ones, you talk about TikTok, Share It. I think one of the classic examples is Truecaller. Reached massive scale in India, tried doing all that business profiles, nothing worked in terms of monetization. So, how do you see distribution is one, reach is one, where you achieve large scales, 100 million plus sort of populations? What happens next? Because what I also understand from this is this demographic also it's their adoption of new apps is at a much faster pace as compared to even the urban population. So they would, I think Zendit came before Share It, and Zendit was chugged out in, I think, in a matter of months. So how do you stay relevant? And the second point, also think about how do you monetize this audience, because you reach 100 million, you start, and you're like, okay, now you don't mean anything to me.
Great, fantastic question. Can I take the second one before? Uh, where's Like I said, uh, and to be honest, all this, I'm going to give you exactly the same answer which I gave, is about understanding, is about understanding the user, uh, is about, if you're going to say that, hey, a ceiling fan which costs maybe only about 1500 rupees, right? If you're trying to sell that, please remember, um, you know, everyone in this room at least makes a 50,000 rupee salary a month. They make about 70, 80,000, or about 2 to 3 lakhs at the max in an year. So if you're trying to sell them an air conditioner, chances low, right? If you're trying to sell them a fan, yes. But remember that fan, the 1200 rupees or 1500 rupees, will come in 12 months. So if you're trying to ask them that, hey, give me 1200 rupees upfront, there's a very small subsection of the entire, population that would be able to pay you upfront, right? And like I said, that they're like probably a million subsets in our presentation, right, itself. But they're filthy rich people, they're landlords, there's everything. But I'm talking in a general of about 80% of people. New models need to be understood, right? If I'm saying I want $200 SaaS fee for a year upfront versus I'm going to split it on a weekly basis, sure, why not? During our research, we spoke to a company called Clinic Healthcare. They sell insurance. Why has no other company been able to, sell insurance to, deep at the underserved is everybody wants their 4,000 rupees of year upfront, right? And this is a true innovation where they have, where they're first of all providing free primary care on phone to everyone, because that has actually reduced the need of going to a doctor and getting admitted, right? So you actually uh, are reducing your, by spending maybe 10 rupee, you're avoiding a expenditure of 100 rupees. And second is they've sliced and diced the payment in 12 months, right? So like I said, like the more you understand the user, how they want to behave, how they want to pay, what are their needs, you can crack it. So simple, like we all say that a US model doesn't work in India, the India model doesn't work in Bharat. You got to really understand, build. You got trillions of dollars right there. And the screen says time's up. Thank you so very much for listening to us. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you, everyone.